Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Outside the Panels. I am your host as always, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and joining me this week is a gentleman who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. It is comic creator, genius, legend. All of those things are applied. It's Mr. Tom Peyer. Tom, how's it going?
Machine, thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Very good. Excellent. So normally I start off with and ask my question. My first question traditionally is, how did you break into comics? But with you, sir, I think the question is there a comic book character you haven't worked on?
Oh, yeah. That's a great one. That's a great question. I never thought I would get this old without ever having put words into the mouth of Benjamin Grimm.
What would you have him say?
Well, I guess I'd have him say it's clobbering time.
Take it out Yancey Street.
Absolutely one of my favorite characters from childhood. And I've gotten to write most of them, but I never got to write the FF.
Oh, man.
And, which, you know, in a way that's fine with me because I feel like, this is horrible to say, but I feel like Stan and Jack kind of said it all.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, strong statement to make, I think, for a lot of fans. The Stan Jack Fantastic Four is that Fantastic Four model, and anything comes after that. So
there have been great runs. My buddy Mark Waid wrote a great run and stuff. But even seeing the Fantastic Four on a screen played by human beings, it really, even if the movies were good, it feels like a demotion for them to be human beings. They're really just these wonderful stylized glyphs. Yeah.
I remember being a kid, and my dad, if he was still alive now, he'd be a geek. So my dad, he brought home a Spider-Man comic and a Fantastic Four comic, and my brother got the Spider-Man comic, and I went ballistic. I was like, "What's this? What Fantastic Four? What's that?" And then of course there's a guy called Johnny on it, so I was like, well, he can't be that bad. So that's kind of that was my introduction to the Fantastic Four. So
that's great.
Cool. So of course we're here to talk about not the Fantastic Four, although they are fantastic. We're here to talk about your book. Let's say DragonFlyman. What's a bit of a mouthful?
Dragonfly. I've got one here. Dragonfly.
Wow, there you go. Check it out.
And this book is due out very, very soon. It's a collected edition of our miniseries. Plus, it's got our free comic book day story from last year that was drawn by Russ Braun. The rest of this book's drawn by Peter Krause excellently, with covers by Jamal Igle, who co-created the characters. And they are two versions of the same character on parallel Earths. Okay. And they each represent a different era of comic book superhero sensibility. Yep. So DragonFlyman lives on the sort of early comics world where everything he does is approved by the comics code.
That's one way of putting
it. He likes it that way. Everything everybody does on that planet is approved by the comics code. If anything untoward happens, it's always off panel. Dragonfly, meanwhile, is a later character who's a sort of righteous, stick-it-to-the-man, ultra-violent vigilante who makes war on violent maniacs and corrupt authorities. And he lives in a much darker world. In his world, the comics code has just been repealed, so they're going overboard. You know? They're just going crazy. So the first issue of they premiered in a series I did with Jamal Igle called The Wrong Earth, where they actually undergo this sort of double Howard the Duck situation where they're both trapped in each other's worlds. Okay. So you see the ultraviolet vigilante has to live in a world where everybody's nice, basically, and vice versa. And it's a nightmare for both of them. But this series shows what their lives were like before the switch. We get to see them
Cool.
in their own milieu, with the characters they know and the sidekicks, and see how they operate differently.
So living in the wrong Earths is kind of like that Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror, where Kirk gets like Kirk and Uhura get transported to like the mirror universe where the Klingons are involved in the. It seems like the nice guy can pretend to be nasty, but the nasty guy can't pretend to be nice. Is that about right?
Well, in Star Trek, that's absolutely true. I think, since both of our guys are this Dragonfly or DragonFlyman, who are like just both the greatest, most capable mass crime fighters in the world, they both and also they're stuck there permanently. So after a while, they kind of start to learn how to function.
Okay, cool.
If Captain Kirk were stuck in the mirror universe forever, then I suppose he'd adjust. And by the way, the reason I have this goatee is I'm pretty sure this is the mirror universe.
That'll explain my purple hair then.
I don't think that this history is leading up toward a good Captain Kirk. It really doesn't feel good.
Okay, that's a fair point. Reading the book's a great read all the way through. It's fun. There's nuances from some really pretty, I don't want to say obvious, but quite glaring, obvious. You can see where the influences are coming from. You've got a little Batman 66 in there, maybe.
Possibly.
I've
heard of that.
You've got some Dark Knight Returns kind of mojo going in there. You've got Nightwing falling out with Batman. The whole the sidekicks giving it all. He never listens to me and all that sort of stuff. So how did you kind of? Because you've been around the industry for how many years?
How long have I been a comic book reader?
Yeah. How long have you been in the industry?
Oh, in the industry, a little over 30 years.
So that's, and as I said, as I alluded to at the start, we've worked with loads of different characters. So how do you manage to kind of cram all those like little influences to give the Dragonman and Dragonfly and DragonFlyman their cohesion, as well as their, I suppose, contrast as well as context?
Well, my nightmare is everybody just thinks that we're tracing this Batman character you mentioned. I've never read him.
Never heard of him at all. Nah.
The real thing is that there's definitely some Batman influence in there, but also every one of these old and naive comics from like 1948 to 1970. I mean, Green Arrow had a boxing glove arrow in his quiver right next to his nuclear warhead arrow.
I love that stuff.
And, they were all wonderful and they were all ridiculous. And just by the same token, after 1986, it seemed like almost everybody was out for vengeance and
totally
more violent, and a little more miserable. And I think it culminates to me with Ben Affleck's Batman actually branding people.
It gets, I suppose, this is the problem with, I guess, it's not the comic books per se. I think it's a little bit of society, the kind of how the readership's changed. Back in the 40s, it was kids that were reading comic books, and that kind of went all the way through to about the 60s and stuff. Then comics became a bit of a college thing, and those kids moved into college, so therefore wanted darker and stronger storylines. So Dark Knight Detective, that Batman dude that no one's ever heard of, he went from being campy to being broody again. And then those college guys turned into adults and then wanted The Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and The Cult and yada almost. And it kind of, for me, I think the problem that you allude to and the difference between the two, Dragonfly and DragonFlyman, it's not the characters that have changed, it's us. It's us that, it's us as readers. We're not, I like when I pick up a comic and I read it for fun because it takes me back. I don't need a comic to be like 22 pages of huge splash art. It's just like, no, man, you missed the point.
I hear you, and I love old comics too. I'm an older guy, but this is not. There's nothing in this comic that that means to say that older comics are better than newer ones.
No, no.
Because I'll tell you, I've read 1 million comics, and most of them are pretty bad, no matter when they're from. But I should also, we're conducting this interview on a day when the person probably most responsible for Batman's transition from a childhood character to an adult character passed away today, Denny O'Neil. And rest in peace.
Definitely.
What a tremendous contribution he made.
I think people will say Denny O'Neil, Batman, but it goes further than that. It goes Green Lantern, it goes Green Arrow. You know, it goes define the comic code for the drug issue. You know, it's he's a true legend, a comic book legend, and when you think of how he continued to care for the Batman character, the mythos, because obviously under his watch, the whole thing changed in the 80s and so on as an editor. So, you know, it's always I always find it quite ironic because from what I've read about Denny O'Neil, he was very much a pacifist type of guy, and yet he'd write things like Green Arrow and Batman as a Dark Knight vigilante, and you'd like, what? How's that work? But I mean, I even read some of his Marvel stuff. So I like some of his Marvel things. So
yeah, Denny there's a subset of really rabid comic fans who were very insulted by the Batman '66 portrayal, and I think a lot of Denny's career is kind of has to do with that.
There's only, I don't really want to get into a Batman conversation, but there's only one Batman that I particularly am not fond of, and that's the Val Kilmer one. Everything else I'll take. You know, I'll take the George Clooney one over Val Kilmer. You know, but the Val Kilmer one, no, I'm done. But
well, those guys in the 1940s weren't too great either. The second one.
Yeah, you've got to think that they're of the time. That's kind of how I look at it.
They're of their time and of their budget.
Yeah, fair point. I sometimes think we do a hardship when we look back at older comic books sometimes, and we kind of paint today's ideals on them. Like, oh, look at there's no big splash page, or the colors are only 4 colors. Where's the digital color? Where's this? Where's that? It's like, yeah, dude, that's like they had 4 pens. That was it.
Right.
Yeah, so come on.
Another thing is these, whether you love Silver Age comics like I do, and I think, or think that they're silly garbage. I think the thing that really made them what they are was the time of the strictest censorship of comics. So you couldn't have, somebody cutting somebody's throat on a cover to get your attention. You had to have something else. What else can we do that's visual that they'll let us do? So, all right, talking gorillas. We'll make the Flash's head huge. We'll give Superman the head of a lion. And they just had to do this stuff all the time. And it was wonderful. And I'm not in favor philosophically of censorship, but in this case, I think it worked for everybody because we're still riffing off those ideas. 60 years later.
I think, and I suppose this kind of goes to the argument of mainstream books versus indie books. As an indie creator, you can do whatever you want to your guys because they're your guys, right? But then if you're working on something like a property, whether it be whichever one, pick one, you are curtailed by that character's media presence. So nowadays, there's not a great deal you can do with Superman, just for the sake of argument. So therefore, your creative story has to be that much better because you can't get away with the cheap tricks. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense in and of itself, but I'd like to push back at it a little.
For it.
Just say that it seems to me in recent years, breaking up and smashing the status quo of mainstream comics characters has become more prevalent than upholding the status quo of these characters.
True.
There's a lot of just like, oh, well, here's the real reason this happened 40 years ago. There's a lot of, blowing up the Daily Bugle sort of thing. I'm not complaining about it, but it seems to me emblematic of a thing that happens a lot now.
Yeah, Alfred last year.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Not the first time for Alfred.
Agreed, not the first time. It's an interesting story, the Alfred one, but hey ho. So what made you want to contrast the two different genres of comic books then in your book?
Yeah, well, it's really kind of autobiographical in a way, because I started reading when they were one way, and then they became the other way. And I was an avid reader during the change, and so it just struck me that when you have a commercial property, as a superhero would say, a chest emblem, and you're of a generation that maybe you were a child 50 years ago, and you look at that chest emblem and it means certain things to you. Citizenship, bravery, helping. And then, but if you are a child 40 years later, you look at the same emblem and it means bloody vengeance. Retribution, stick it to the man. But it's the same character, it's the same emblem. That's interesting to me. And I guess because it's a commercial property that has to maintain and has to have a long life, that as you were saying before, they'll change to suit the world around them.
Yeah. Do you prefer working mainstream or do you prefer working indie?
They're both, there's one great thing about both of them, and each has one great thing. The mainstream, when you're working at Marvel and DC and you get to put words in the mouths of characters you love since you were a child, that is the best feeling. And when you're working indie and you can tell your story uninterrupted without concerns of a larger universe, then that is great too.
Cool.
So you have to pick.
I can imagine it's hard to pick one over the other, and I wouldn't ask anybody to do that. I'm just interested because I know creators who are pro big two, and I know creators that are pro indie, and then I kind of see them switch over. So you'll see like people like yourself move from mainstream into indie, and then people like Ram V, who works on Vault Comics, can then move over to do Catwoman and Justice League Dark. And you're kind of like, that's kind of a thing. And so I was just curious about that. It's interesting you say about interruptions, because
Since I was a kid, I've seen people say, sort of like plant their flag and say, I hate every kind of comic but this one. And I never understood that. I loved all comics. I didn't care if they were DC, Marvel, indie, newspaper comics. I had to have it all.
Yeah.
I don't see what's wrong with any comic as long as it's any good.
Ooh, I don't know. There's some bad ones out there right now.
I mean, I said as long as it's any good.
That's your command. All right. On that note, that's a great place for us to take a quick break. Here's an advert for one of our other shows on the UCPN. Don't forget to check it out. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
From the aisles to the review station, Undercover Capes brings you all things action figure related. Join host Bob O'Mac as he shares his insights and thoughts on the plastic revolution.
Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Dragon Machine Hughes. Next to me, comic guru, genius, creator, writer, Ben Grimm fan, Tom Peyer. Tom, we were talking just before the break there about the kind of contrast between, I guess, the older Silver Age comics. Is Silver Age your favorite era of comic books?
Well, somebody once said, it might have been Maggie Thompson, somebody once said the golden age of comics is 7. And
Fair point.
That's when you read the stuff that stays with you all your life. And it's not because it's the best stuff, but it's your stuff.
Yeah.
And so I can go back to comics from that time and just feel a little bit of a thrill like I felt when I read them the first time. But I don't care what era a comic is from, but I do go back and reread Silver Age ones. And I like ones from before I started reading to see what I missed.
All right.
Like they're these just insane Black Hawk comics from the 50s where they're fighting these costumed communists all the time.
Oh man, yeah. Captain America always fighting communists or Nazis.
There's that wonderful Captain America panel from the 50s where he's like watching an atomic bomb go off and talking to Bucky about it's the most beautiful sight he's ever seen. It'll keep us free.
Oh my God. So talk to us a little bit about Ahoy Comics. So Ahoy Comics, the publisher for your book. Ahoy Comics, your choice to go there?
I was one of the 3 people who started the company.
Nepotism, that's what it is.
They didn't have any trouble getting me.
Fair enough. So who else formed the company with you then?
We're 3 old friends here in Syracuse, New York, and Hart Seeley, our publisher, who for many years was a newspaper reporter, and Frank Camuso, our chief creative officer, who for many years was a newspaper political cartoonist.
Cool.
And little old me. And
you wouldn't sell
3.5 years ago, we went out for breakfast and cooked this up out of we decided to start a company out of sheer ignorance of what it would entail. And it's been a great experience. We've got a lot of great fans. We've got a lot of terrific attention. We have a terrific publicist named David Hyde, who does great work for us. And
I know David. Yeah, David from Superfan. Yeah. I know David.
The first article about us was in the Hollywood Reporter, which is pretty good jumping off. And you wouldn't get that from Syracuse usually. But and we have Stuart Moore, who's a freelance operations manager for us.
Okay.
And just a bunch of great people. The reason we've succeeded at all is initially you want to do everything yourself and you're bad at like that's of it. But we were able to get in some people who really know what they're doing.
Cool. I think the last few years has been the rise of the indie book. You've got yourselves, you've got Scout, you've got Vault, you've got and I think the production value of the comic books is absolutely, it's insanely good. I looked at DragonFlyman, and as I was reading it to prep for this, I was like blown away. I was like, it doesn't feel like an indie book. You know what I'm saying? It feels like a proper boof. And if you get it as a trade paperback, that will be so hefty and it'll just look the bomb. So, kudos to your creative team, definitely. Speaking of which, you've got Peter Krause on there. That's
what?
Your artist, Peter Krause, he's a fantastic artist. How did you manage to land Peter?
Incredible. Yeah. We I was aware of him for a long time. This old Shazam Park, and just watching him. He did a couple of books or a couple of series with Mark Waid, Insufferable and The Irredeemable. Yeah, and so beautiful. And then he did these Archie World War II stories that were even more beautiful. And we saw the stuff we just really wanted him, and it turned out he was able to work us in, and that was great.
It's interesting you mentioned Mark Waid, because Mark Waid's our early conversation. Mark Waid seems to be all about deconstructing the superheroes. He's all about kind of breaking it down. Where I guess you're trying to hold the traditional values, potentially of the comic book characters, and I like the fact that in the comic book place you can have both of those. You can have people who want to break down the superhero and rebuild him, and you can also have the ones that maintain. I have to say, hand on heart, I kind of agree with you. All this breaking down stuff, it's just like, Death of Superman. Oh, yeah, fine. Nightfall, yeah, he's going to get better.
Well, it feels big what's happening, but how often can it happen before it starts to numb you?
Yeah, I think somewhere along the line, someone said that the average turnover of the readership should be 5 years. So every 5 years, that's it. So you said you start at 7. So by 12, you put your comics away and move on to something else. I think
They
nowadays,
used to be.
yeah, definitely. But I think nowadays there's so many distractions through these things, mobile phones. You can't see it on the camera. Your mobile phone, then you've got video games. You know,
Yeah.
and also, I mean,
Older crowd, isn't that, you don't outgrow them anymore, so people stay longer. And I remember when I was going back and looking at 50s stuff, they would do a story. 3 years later, they'd do the same story because they figured it was a whole different audience. They would just redraw it and write a new script, but it's the same story.
Okay.
But then when like in the 90s, I wrote a Superman story. It had a body swap plot. And somebody wrote it and said, we've already had a body swap plot. I looked it up and it was 9 years ago. We can't do another body swap story after 9 years. What's wrong with you people? Your memories are too long.
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. I remember when Bane blew up Arkham to let everybody out. And I remember turning to my then wife. I said, "Hey, they've just blown up Arkham again. I'm sure they did that in Batman 400." I'm like, or Detective 400 probably.
Right.
I am so dating myself now. It is unbelievable. So I kind of agree with you, and this is not just about comics. It's kind of about like films, sport teams. The time you get into your sports, that is your best team, right? So you mentioned you're a Yankees fan. I'm a Dolphins fan, so football is my passion. To me, there'll never be another quarterback as good as Dan Marino, and I'm sure there will be eventually, you know, for the Dolphins. God knows when. But it's the same, I guess, for you when you started watching baseball. Your Yankees, when you started watching them, in your head are the best Yankees. Same way that I think people like Jim Aparo is the best artist for Batman and Sal Buscema for Spider-Man. Because that's what
Yeah. I'll look at, there's a particular couple issues of Superman that I read when I was 6. And when I look at them, those pictures again, I feel like I'm walking through the world's most prestigious museum. You know, it's just,
cool.
That's what art is to me, because it burned itself in the back of my brain when I was young.
So I noticed on Twitter this week, the age-old argument, writer versus artist, came up. To be fair, I don't know what's going on, but Twitter's been really hard work for lots of different reasons. But writer versus artist, I'm pretty much on the fence that both are equally as important. In fact, I'd go as far as say I can read a good story with bad art. Yeah, but I can't read a bad story with good art. So, but when I've been speaking to creators such as yourself, I kind of feel that writers act as somewhat like a bit of a de facto sub-editor at times, because it's like you guys, the writers, craft the story, then ship it off to the artist to do whatever it is they want to do, and then it comes back. And then that's kind of like, well, do we need to change this panel? Do we need to do this? And so on and so forth. Is that, from the outside in, is that kind of how it works, or does everyone work differently?
I'm not wild about the idea of taking this beautiful collaboration and turning it into a competition. Okay. I don't understand why one person has to be more important than the other.
Agreed. Do you need to take that? I will pause this.
My phone was ringing.
Okay. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I turned it off.
Yeah, I agree with you. I personally think it is a collaboration. It's just kind of, from when I've been speaking to writers, it's kind of always seems to be like, you write the script, it goes off to the artist, then you have the collaboration about which bit works. And I kind of think to my head, does that mean the writer acts like a bit of an editor at times to try and
every team works differently, and I have different artists that I work differently with. It's just, you just find the groove that works for you. It's and that's part of the job. It's just sounding out your collaborator and finding out what's comfortable for everybody. Cool. It's a big part of the job. I give artists great respect because they spend more time on the story than anybody.
I think that's a really valid point as well, because you you've got to write to the artist's strength, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nobody, as someone once explained it to me, nobody ever got into this business to draw office furniture.
Well, that explains my art then.
You really wouldn't, you wouldn't know it looking at some comics that are just loaded with office furniture.
What was I going to say? I read somewhere that one of the reasons why Mr. Fantastic has stretchy arms is because Jack Kirby couldn't draw elbows.
Jack Kirby drew the best elbows.
Right, indeed. But we won't even talk about Rob Liefeld. All right, okay. So, so your trade paperback for your mini series, it's out this month.
It is out this month, a little later this month, and
Yep.
Keep an eye out. I hope you like it. Hope you grab it.
I think people should read it because it's an absolute. Do you know what I think it reminds me? I know we talked about bats and we talked about Star Trek. Do you know what it reminds me of? Probably the most. And I mean this as a compliment. Do you remember that Justice League cartoon episode where the Lantern and Hawkgirl and Flash, they get kind of separated and get put into a JSA type of world, and everything's just golly gee whiz, and it's kind of the Black Canary's always there bringing drinks on a tray, you know, and I'm like, it's that kind of sensibility, and I absolutely love old Justice Society comics. I've got like a decent little run of All-Star comics upstairs, which has the first appearance of Power Girl and arguably the first appearance of the Huntress, depending on who you're listening to. So I love that style of comics. And when I was looking through your book, I had to just, I'm not gonna lie, I had a stupid daft grin on my face. I was like, oh yeah,
Thank you.
And that's how it's supposed to be. And then obviously you get the more modern take on the character. And maybe it's me. I was like a little bit, I don't know how I feel about that now, because I enjoyed him as, you know, just a society character rather than, you know, the current like roar. So I was. It's an interesting read. It's thought provoking in ways that I didn't expect. So no.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, round of applause. What's next? You're more than welcome. What's next for Dragonfly and DragonFlyman? Is it going to continue on, or?
We just started work on the second series of The Wrong Earth.
Oh, so it's continuation. All right.
We have Jamal Igle back. We did Dragonfly and DragonFlyman the way we did it because Jamal, the co-creator of these characters, had to go away and do another book for a year for another company. And
cool.
I just wanted to keep working on the characters, and I'd hope people wanted to keep reading them. So
cool.
Jamal was around to do covers, and we were able to get Peter to do this. And I hope we can do it again. I hope we can do another Dragonfly and DragonFlyman, but the main series, the sort of present day series, is The Wrong Earth. And they both offer something a little different from each other, but they feel the same too because you go back and forth between the two characters.
Cool. Don't tell my wife. My wife hates it when, you know, the Star Wars movies. She hates it that like episodes 4, 5, and 6 came out before episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then 7, 8, and 9 came out of them. It's like every time I watch a Star Wars movie, I have to explain. She goes, "Which one's this? Where's this in the story?" I have to. And the next question I get is, "Are the Ewoks in this one?" I'm like, "No, there's no."
Well, why are you making her watch 1, 2, and 3 anyway?
Because she's pregnant once. I'm joking. Yes, 5's the best one. 5's always best. Empire's always the best one.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. Even if even as a story-wise, it's a middle and a middle and a middle. That's fine. Excellent. All right, Tom Peyer, thank you very much for spending the time with me today talking about your comic. Where can people get it from? Local comic book shops? Is it on Comixology? Is it direct from Ahoy Comics?
Local comic book shops, Comixology, bookstores.
Cool.
A collected edition.
Excellent.
And support your local comic book shop.
Definitely. My local comic book shop's not open yet. Thanks to
support local bookstores of all kinds. Actually.
Check your local comic book store, see if they're offering curbside, if they're offering mail order, if they're okay being open. Check if you're wearing your face masks, make sure you're up there and sanitize your hands. Just remember not to get the gel on the comic book. Somebody has to buy that after you've flicked through the pages. Tom, thank you very much for taking the time out, man. Really appreciate it. And if you ever need anything else in the future, just give me a shout.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. All right. So that's it for this episode of Outside the Panels. I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. Do not forget to check out UCPN for all your favorite podcasts, including No Price Podcast, where we talk everything Marvel, and of course, The Definitive Crusade, where, to be fair, I might give DC a kick and cost them not shipping me my comic books anymore. That means it. All right, this is me saying adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.